Hello and welcome to the MP Bros movie reviews. Mike, it's good to see you. This is our second video now, so I think we've got it under control. Who cares what happens anyway? Because we are just here to have some fun. For you, the viewers, welcome back. If you've seen our first, if not, welcome to the show. We are going to review some movies for you. We're going to show you our extraordinary review rating system. And hopefully get you excited about movies, and hopefully also maybe subscribe to our channel and like and comment below. But ultimately, we don't have a title, Mike. I think that's a meme from our first one. Is it's still a working title?
It is a
Um,
very long working title that he just said.
yeah.
Uh, but yes, Phil, we are back for our second episode. Uh, Hopefully, it won't take us as long to edit this one than the previous one. But I think we have a great movie for today. Uh, but our talks as we were watching this movie, clearly I'm on that side.
Yes, and
So,
and I am on the other side. Um,
so,
so
so go, Phil. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, it's okay. So before we get to introing what we reviewed, again, I am the P in the MMP, Phil,
Mm,
and over here on the other side of the camera is the M of MMP, Mike.
and I'm Mike.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we are brothers who like to review some movies and play video games and do some other stuff. But here today we have an exciting movie. If you're a fan like Mike, or you have some great laughs and some plot points to dissect if you're on my side. And we'll get to that, I promise. So Mike, I think the first thing we have to do is go back to our movie review rating
Yes.
system.
So,
So you go.
so for the review system, we explained it in the first episode, but we'll keep explaining it for the next couple, just so that if you are new to our channel, like Phil said earlier, you are familiar with how we are going to be rating this movie. So, it is based off the rings from Lord of the Rings. And we did that, like we said before in our first video, to gauge how good or how bad a movie is based on levels. Because when you think of 5 stars, you go, oh, it's the 5-star movie. But was it a good movie? Was it a great movie? Was it an even better movie than you thought it would be? And we broke it down into those levels. Our first level being the worst of the levels. If it, you could call it negative levels, if you will, and that's our Dwarven Rings, right? For everyone at home, you know how many Dwarven Rings there are. Uh, Post down in the comments. See if maybe you get it right. Uh, let's see. So maybe we get some engagement from that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have our middle or neutral plane of just it was a fine movie, and that's our mortal rings, right? And there are 9 mortal rings.
You sure they're not 10?
No, there's not 10, Phil.
There's
I
absolutely
know
9.
there's
Yeah,
not
there's
because
absolutely 9. Yes.
uh and then we have our third level or higher level, which is our elven rings, and there's 3, and that is for truly great movies. And how would you distinguish a truly great movie from a great movie or a great movie? Um and then obviously you got to have your one ring to rule them all. And that is a movie that changed the game, changed how people think of movies, watch movies, film movies, create movies, things of that ilk that you're looking for in a movie that just you go, oh my gosh, now we have to do it a different way. Um, and that, fair listeners, is a brief overview of our rating system. And with that in mind, and in that spirit of the rating system, we are going to be rating today, or talking about first, the movie called Kingdom of Heaven. It's from 2005, and it was directed and produced by Ridley Scott. And our main actor in this movie is Orlando Bloom. Got to do the elves some kudos here. And the the main actress is Eva Green, who is my personal actress crush. So I'm not biased for her performance here at all. And so, just a quick synopsis, or yeah, a summary of the movie itself. Uh, it's based in the time of the Crusades during the Middle Ages, and it's a collision between Europe and the Middle East. A blacksmith named Balin. I'm sorry, I'm about to butcher that. And he lost his family in the beginning of the movie, and he's having a crisis of faith. And the raging wars in the Holy Land seem distant to him, but yet he is pulled in to this world when his long lost father comes looking for him to give him his lands in the Holy Land. Because at this point in time, for people who don't know the history, the Christians are in control of Jerusalem, and the Arabs are fighting to take back Jerusalem. And the leader in this movie of the Arabs is a character or a historical figure named Saladin. Um, and that's pretty much where we take to start off. And Phil, I don't know. I know you aren't as fond of this type of stuff as I am, but I loved the first couple of scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
Building up his life in Europe pre going to the Holy Land.
Yeah. So I will say, I do enjoy like the Middle Ages and the Crusades historically, but I did not think this movie did a fantastic job of portraying it at the beginning. I mean, it's other than multiple ways I can say this. I think there was an issue with how they paced at the beginning of the movie. I think after watching it, the first part of the movie 2 times, because I started watching it originally a couple weeks ago, and then we watched it again when we were. I started watching it again when we watched the movie together, and it just felt to me at the beginning there was just like, man, there were plot points that were starting to be developed that never went anywhere. There were characters that you thought were going to be important as this guy starts his journey towards the Crusades, and then bam, they just kill him out of nowhere, and they're just like, man, the one guy who got like stabbed in the throat in the fight scene, I was like, man, I like this guy. I think he's going to be a cool, boom, stabbed in the throat, dead. Like,
are you talking about the blonde-haired German character?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you there. He seemed like he was gonna be a cool man at arms in like whatever group they were putting together, and then he died.
He died. Yeah. So I had some concerns at the beginning. And there were. I felt like it was understanding that like the travel to Jerusalem like is a long travel in that time of year or time of age in that age. So that like they have to kind of do some time skips to move the characters towards what the real story is, which is them in the Middle East. But it felt rushed to me. It felt like we were just this one guy who was a blacksmith in a French town immediately became part of this band of brothers who then got murdered. And then as they were trying to go to Jerusalem, his poppy starts dying. So like, you know, it just seemed so quick to me. It seemed so quick. It seemed like there was a lack of development in the characters. Truthfully, I love Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson's in this movie, guys. He is, but he's not in the whole movie. He's not it. And I was like, man, I wanted to see more Liam Neeson because I love Liam Neeson. But there just seemed like there wasn't really development of their relationship, and I think maybe that's the point because he's like a long lost father. But then he just like gives him everything. I would be like, man, this. Sure. Like, yeah.
I like that though. I like the fact that we have this mysterious origin into a mysterious future of a person who clearly doesn't want it because of Orlando Bloom's character throughout the whole movie up until probably halfway through the movie has no interest in anything that's going on because he doesn't feel due, right? And that's also stems from the very beginning of the movie where, you know, you see him lose his family and he has that crisis of faith that I alluded to earlier in the story synopsis. So like I enjoyed him having no clue what's going on, being dragged into the woods by like a giant German and his merry gang of crusaders. And I don't know, I thought it was fun. I like that kind of I'm a sucker for that kind of like almost that Robin Hood Men in Tights kind of feel. But then it got serious because Poppy Bloom just dies like 2 minutes after you get introduced to his character, and he's like, "Take all of my lands, son.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I was so
Distant.
no, yeah, I was like, I'm sorry I abandoned you for all your life."
Yeah. Yeah, but well, you have to remember. So at the beginning of the movie, Liam Neeson is like, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this?" And Orlando Bloom goes, "Like, no, I don't want to." Right? And then you're like, "Okay, well, why would you say that?" And then there's like a flop. He's like, "Oh wait, actually, I'm gonna kill this guy, and then I am gonna run away now." And I was just like, man, like. It just felt kind of disingenuous. Like, you could have killed anybody at any time, and that still doesn't mean like now you want to take over the throne of some lands from your long lost dad. I don't know. It was, to me, it felt like there could have been some more development. And so I wasn't too. I don't think other than having to watch this movie, Mike, because you told me I had to watch this movie so we could review it. I don't think I would have gotten past that first like half hour. I think I would have watched it. I would have been like, man, I love these actors. I think they've done great stuff. This really isn't pulling me in.
Well,
but
I got speaking ready, kind of figure out where Phil's gonna fall today. We haven't even gotten halfway through the scenes we're gonna start talking about, and Phil's already cashing out.
No. But I will say there are some saving graces in the later parts of the movie. I think Ridley Scott did some great cinematography at the ends, and we'll get to that. But I have so many not problems. I wouldn't call them problems because I still think it's a fair movie. It's just, I was wanting more, and I didn't really get it
at the beginning.
Yeah,
it was a slow burn.
Yeah.
So as the movie continues, like we're getting to slowly but surely,
Mm-hmm.
Orlando Bloom's character gets on a boat. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse us both.
Mm-hmm.
Gets on a boat and heads to the Holy Lands.
Mm-hmm.
During this time, there's a storm, and during that storm, he crashes into a beach where he finds another character and his servant. And the reason I'm talking about this scene is because it is alluded to later on in the movie that this is a scene of importance.
Mm.
And if you were to just watch this scene by itself, I don't think you would think that this movie was going to go anywhere with it. So what did you think of the scene with the Muslim? I forget what they called him. He was a
Like
Muslim,
the servant who attacked
servant
him?
and the master relationship between these two characters that attack Orlando Bloom's character on this beach.
Yeah. So I think I talked a little bit this before we started recording, but so when I watched that part, I was like that. The only thing that made me like consider it at all was the fact that at the end, after he kills the servant, which we first, spoiler alert, again, we're reviewing the movie, so we're gonna spoil some stuff. He says that's like the master, but it's actually the servant, right? It's like a flip flop, right? You find that out later.
He's
in the
lying
movie.
about who's the master. And
Yeah,
who's the servant.
yeah. And so the only saving grace from that for me at the end is where he says something about enemies knowing, will know Orlando Bloom, and it's kind of like this ominous kind of like, hey, like you did good, like you were good in this.
You're an honorable
person. So like you will reap the benefits of that. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, this guy's got to come back, right?
Right.
But that whole part where it says that, and then it just cuts to him like somehow getting to Jerusalem again because he's now taken the horse in the middle of the desert and found. I was just like, well, like whoa, like what happened to that guy? Like where'd he go? Like was there any more? Is there like what? Like what? Am I missing something?
What did you expect them to be buddy cop?
Yeah, I wouldn't say buddy cops.
Buddy cops, hitting the mean streets of Jerusalem.
Yeah, I mean, but like he just killed his like buddy, and then just like part ways in the desert because Orlando Bloom was so honorable. I don't know. My reads of how Middle Ages worked is that you still try to kill that person 9 times out of 10. So I will say. I don't know. For me, that one was just it felt kind of random and out of nowhere. And then eventually I figured it out that like, oh, well, this is gonna play into something in the end or something later on in the story, which it does. But I think we skipped an important part, which before this, right? So we said Liam Neeson dies, right? Like he's gone, right? But he gives him everything, right? There's like this whole ceremony where like Liam Neeson is like dying on a bed because he's sick, and you're like, oh, poor Liam Neeson, right? And he's like, I give you everything, and I give you my sword, and then he knights him, right? Like he's like, you are now a knight, and then he slaps him, and I thought that was hilarious. Anytime Orlando Bloom gets slapped is always funny, whether it's Gimli or of Liam Neeson. Yeah, and I think that was important because of the next scene that occurs. So
After they get to Jerusalem.
after they get to Jerusalem, which is by far one of the scenes that I was telling Mike, how much a suspension of disbelief that I had to create in my mind was like you have to be kidding me. So the basis of this portion, and this is another reason why I was just struggling with this movie, is because Orlando Bloom gets to Jerusalem. He's walking around with Liam Neeson. You know, I think the character's name is Godfrey. His sword, right? And like they're shooting it in a way where like they keep looking at Orlando Bloom, and then they're looking at random people in the like the market
who are now looking at
Orlando Bloom, and then they keep looking at the sword. So you're like, they know the sword. The sword's important, so they're like connecting the dots. And they like corner him in like this one area with a fountain, and they start like interrogating him, and they were basically like, how did you get that? And he was like, I knew him or whatever. And then he was like, yeah, you knew him? And he was like, I didn't, you're like saying in the head, like, well, yeah, he could have killed them, right? And they're like, well, his green eyes, right? And Orlando Bloom like does like a flashback moment where he's like thinking about his long lost dad, and he goes, no, you mean blue eyes. And they're like, oh my lord, thank you. Like, hello, welcome. And you're like, dude, if I killed somebody, I could look at their eyes too. Like, how they don't know. They don't know what happened.
It's the Middle Ages. It's about honor and integrity. Why would he lie?
Suspension of belief or disbelief, right? Like that point, I was just like, this is like, he gives him everything after only knowing him for a short period of time, which sure, maybe like blood right and all that oath, like honorable knight stuff. But then it's like these random guys in Jerusalem who have, I mean, sure, they have an allegiance, but like, they have no like requirement to keep that allegiance. Godfrey's not there saying, this is my son, you will follow him, right? And so they have no idea. They have no idea he's their actual son. And they're like, yes, my lord, welcome. Here is the palace of Godfrey. You have all of the wenches and all of the maids giving you the freshest of water in Jerusalem. So I was like, man, this is kind of crazy. So that was just my take on that scene.
I mean, I got nothing for you.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I mean, you could still love the movie and admit to the craziness of 4 random or 5 random dudes in Jerusalem just because this guy knows the color of his eyes, right? Automatically goes, yes, you are the son. You are our Lord now. Man, it didn't feel right to me.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So then the movie continues on, and we get to him being introduced to the court of King Baldwin,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this whole dynamic that gets set up in these scenes where Orlando Bloom's character is now learning who is who's the members of the king's court, and that sort of thing, really shows the dynamic that will eventually play to the ultimate conclusion of the movie. And you have your Templar Knights with their red crosses, and then you have the Knights Hospitallers with their bluish crosses. And it turns out that the king of Jerusalem is primarily served by the Knights Hospitallers sects, who are more loyal to him, and then the Templars tend to be more like a more militant faction within the armies of Christendom inside of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
And we get a great introduction to what I think is the antagonist of the movie, right? So like there is a battle scene at the end of the movie between Christians and Muslims, right? And eventually, as history dictates, right, the Muslims take over Jerusalem. But I think the real antagonist is that this guy is that one of the Knights Templar is his name's Guy, and because of his actions is what creates. At least what's portrayed in the movie, his role as an antagonist is what creates the scene which leads to the overthrow of Jerusalem, or at least, sorry, the surrender of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I mean, Guy is played by I think it's Martin Kazakis. He's a guy. He's like in Triple X and a couple of other things in like the early 2000s, the mid 2000s. He's notable.
He was playing villains in that time.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, he's playing villains, and so he's just another villain. I think he did a fantastic job. He was definitely
I hated him.
Yeah,
I hated him.
I think he acted his part perfectly. Right? He had a king for the Knights Templar that they served, who he kind of was like, "Fuck you." Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I forgot we're not cursing. Sorry. He kind of like, I'm gonna play the game with you, even though you're my like lord, but I'm really in charge because I control the soldiers, which I thought was a great like power move on his point. And then obviously
the reason he is in charge of the soldiery is a very important point, because we later find out through this next scene when we actually meet the King of Jerusalem, King Baldwin, is that it's the leper king of Jerusalem, and leprosy has taken over his body. He is very far along in the disease, and the reason why he's in such a weak position in terms of, you know, Guy leading the army and the loyalty of most of the men is because of this disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I think he did a great job. I think that was great acting. I enjoyed his portrayal of that character very much. And so that's Mike. I'm giving some good credits to this movie, right? Like I'm not trying to swamp it all the way down to what I think. Right? I like I said, I have issues, but I think there are some great parts.
And I appreciate that. But moving forward, we're now introduced to King Baldwin, and we are in his chambers, and there's a phenomenal scene. I love this scene. This scene is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and it's him playing chess with Orlando Bloom's character, and he's basically, you know, explaining to the audience of like just how important like statesmanship and politicking is in the state of in the kingdom of Jerusalem. And I don't know about you, Phil, but this to me was very, very powerful scene. And believe it or not, sorry, before you go, the king is played by Edward Norton.
I didn't know it was Edward Norton.
It was, yeah. It's difficult to kind of get it through, but because the character is leper and he's wearing that mask to cover his face, but it's Edward Norton.
Yeah, no, so I mean, I've told you some of my complaints, which is character development. I think this is the one scene that really helps develop Orlando Bloom's character and his relationship with the king and some of their motivations. So yeah, I think, and this is where I start like turning into my issues with the first part of the movie. It starts to develop into okay, now I see where this is going. I'm more pleased with what's happening. I think because they slowed down the movie, right? They were able to pace it a little bit better, give some character development to the main actors and actresses in it, and actually start telling stories instead of just time skipping along to make sure he gets to Jerusalem and then throwing in a whole bunch of smackling of conversations with other people and killing off Liam Neeson way too early in the movie.
You're not bitter about that.
Not salty at all. Not salty at all. But so, I mean, let's not belabor all of the minute details within the middle of this movie because there are a lot of details, right? Orlando Bloom takes over the land. He helps his, local people fill water. Yeah. And he tries to be the noble lord, but also not being a lord, right? Like he's like an everyday common lord. And then
he didn't want it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we could talk about the love interest. So I mean, you already mentioned it. So tell me, what's your feelings, right? What's your feelings with regards to Orlando Bloom and Eva Green duking it out?
Duking it out.
Yeah.
Yo. I am jealous that Orlando Bloom gets to kiss Eva Green in this movie. I love Eva Green and everything. She's very, in my opinion, she's a very great actress, and she commits with in this movie, she commits to the role of being a subservient wife, and then when Baldwin dies, the next queen of Jerusalem before eventually the city falls. Um, her eyes to me are so expressive throughout this movie. Just the pain and sadness that she kind of portrays, especially because she doesn't want to be married to Guy. She doesn't like the fact that he's such a warmonger, and she loves the people of Jerusalem and then the peoples of this land because, uh, she's actually grown up there. I want to say is she'll at least lived there the majority of her life. I don't remember actually the time frame, and um, she becomes a love interest for Orlando Bloom because obviously, she goes to stay with him and all this other stuff. And eventually the King Baldwin tries to marry her off to Orlando Bloom because they know that they both love each other, even though it's a kind of against the rules and it's a little taboo because she's still technically married and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So again, the way her eyes are so expressive, the way she whenever she's on screen, there's like a presence of a loving sister, but also that sadness of it is the Middle Ages and women are used as pawns in marriage for alliances and such. And I really appreciated that it kind of felt like she portrayed that kind of role, and I felt it through her acting.
Yeah. I would agree. I thought she was great in the movie. I thought her portrayal, again, I think you hit it on the head. Her expressiveness. There were definitely times in non-spoken words she was able to express feelings, and I think that came well across the camera. I don't know, Mike. You might disagree with this. I think she could have not been in the movie, and I think the same exact things would have happened. And it just
Don't do that.
I'm just saying, like impact wise, impact
no, you're
wise to
100%
the
right.
the plot points during the movie. I think it just wasn't significant.
It did feel as if the romance aspect of this movie was on the back burner, but I think that was purposeful
Mhm.
because the movie isn't a love rom com in the city of Jerusalem. It's an era piece for a war era piece,
Mhm.
and again, I'll
Yeah.
fight you. Don't
Yeah.
talk about her
Fair
like
point. Fair point. Fair
that.
point. You're right. It's not a rom com. This isn't a romance thriller. I just wanted to make that point. Uh, so you could get mad at me. All right.
Yeah.
So then I think the next point we can hit is probably the first combat scene, right?
Yes.
You want to explain a little bit what happened?
So leading up to this scene that we're going to talk about, um, the Templar, the Templars throughout this movie are warmongers, and they want a war with the Arabs. So, one of the commanders decides he's going to attack Saladin's sister, and he kills her. But that's kind of happens off screen. So now Saladin has to come and avenge uh, the betrayals. Excuse me, I'm getting that wrong. He does that later in the movie because he attacks a migrant caravan first. Sorry,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm incorrect. Uh, and then they respond. The army comes, and the two armies of Jerusalem and then of the Arabs meet at this I forget the location's name. They meet. They have almost a fight, and that's where we get Orlando Bloom re-meeting an important character from before.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it's one. Well, the first thing about that that scene, I enjoyed it, and the reason I enjoyed it was because it was very much like Orlando Bloom and like 7 guys on horseback against like 100,000 man army, and I was like typical Orlando Bloom, can't help himself. He's got to be like small man against huge army. It's just another great portrayal of a fighter with low odds and gonna fight against the huge army against them. And so I enjoyed the scene. Obviously, even though their whole like all of the other warriors in his pack get like massacred, like him and like his hand is like the only people that survive. Maybe there's like 2 or 3 other guys who survive. And then luckily the king and the Knights Templars and their huge armies finally like show up. They are
Evening the odds,
yeah, evening the odds. And then there's like a nice conversation between the king and Saladin where they're like, "Hey, like we're gonna hold the person accountable who did this, but we don't want a war with you right now."
Mm.
And I think that was an impactful moment because it kind of showed like the two main players in the historical context, right, saying to each other, "Hey, we don't have to go to war right now. There's like
We don't want to go to war.
we don't
Yeah.
want to go to war, right?" I think this hits on the theme of like, hey, actually, like, there's coexistence happening in the Middle East, and they can actually like not all be killing each other all the time. Obviously, that kind of changes because certain people come into power and then start killing people um, later in the movie. But I think it was a good movement, and then also because then the fat king or the fat lord who's in charge of that that town that I'm also forgetting the name right now. He like comes out and greets the king, and then gets his ass whipped in the face. And I was like, hell yeah, like.
And then he has to kiss the ring
Yeah.
to show his sorriness, and that's when you see the leopard king's skin,
Mhm.
and you realize that this man is super sick. And you see, like, I thought it was interesting because his hand looks like it's falling apart.
Mhm.
Right? It's bloodied. There's like skin falling off, but he has that ring, and this man who gets chastised is such a coward that he basically licks the diseased hand of King Baldwin.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going,
You could have just kissed the ring. You didn't have
you
to lick
could have
his
just
hand.
like you could have went, "Mwah,"
Yeah.
like, eh. But no, he like goes, "Mwah," and you're like, oh,
Ugh.
that's so gross.
Yeah.
But it showed just how much of a scuzz this guy is, and I will find his name right
Yeah.
now.
So then there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the middle. There's like more romantic scenes. I don't know if you want to go into it, Mike, with regards to what happens between that fight scene where they then imprison that lord, the Knights Templar.
So just before we go, the
Mhm.
character who we're talking about, played by Brendan Gleeson, is Renaud de Chatillon.
That's
I hope
fantastic.
I did not butcher that name.
Fantastic pronunciation, Michael.
Yeah, it took like 2 seconds of French. No,
Yeah,
that didn't happen at all.
that's false. Why are you lying to everyone? But I mean, I don't know how much. I think I don't want to belabor like the kind of minute details that occur in the middle of this first battle, and then the eventual murder of Saladin's family member. I think there are. I mean, there are important plot points. I think there's development of Orlando Bloom eventually becoming like, oh, this is my rightful
We can
place.
skip ahead. Yeah, we don't have to go over everything
Yeah,
completely.
but so then we get to the point where the Knights Templar again are going on a murdering spree, right? They want war, they're warmongers, and then eventually we get to what is the ultimatum that's placed in front of Saladin is like he has to take action for his people, right? And that means coming to war in Jerusalem.
Yeah. So, like you said, the movie moves along, and we get to finally where Saladin is coming to conquer Jerusalem. And, they're setting up their defenses, they're getting everything ready. And then we get to the scene, which Phil, when we were watching it, said he made him laugh the most, was the ridiculousness of that priest character.
Yeah. So you have to remember there's like, right before the Battle of Jerusalem, there was like a massacre of the knights. They get destroyed by Saladin's army. And so there is a lack of knights in Jerusalem. And so Orlando Bloom, as like the now Lord King of Jerusalem, because he's in charge
of the commander of the defense.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like thinking from like Game of Thrones, like Lord Commander. Yeah. So he basically just starts going around to all the peasants and all the working class, who's like, "Hey, this is your city too. You're gonna die for it." And they're all like, "Yeah, we're gonna die for this city that has treated us all shittily, or excuse me, all bad." And so I start like I'm like laughing because it's typical like you need the fighting working class people who aren't knights. They're not professional swordsmen or professional knights, but they are gonna protect their city. But then there's a point. And this is now my second time in the movie where I have to hone in on one specific scene because it makes me makes me have feelings. Where Orlando Bloom starts knighting the peasants, and this priest just goes, "Do you think knighting these men will make them better fighters?" And then Orlando Bloom, straight faced, looks at the camera. Well, he doesn't look at the camera, but he looks at the priest and goes, "Yes." And I died laughing. Mike, I don't know when you saw that scene, but when I heard that, I was like, bullshit. Like this is This is funny. It's making me
He's
laugh.
playing 4D chess, man. He's making everyone think to themselves, "Oh, I'm a knight. I have this duty to protect my city now." And it was all psychological warfare, Phil. All psychological warfare. They're gonna lose. They know we're gonna lose. They're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, basically, and the city's gonna burn if they like just keep fighting. And everyone is like sad and downtrodden. They know it's coming. They know it's gonna be a bad time. And he knights them, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah. Mike, I totally understand your point. I think there's a different way they could have portrayed that. I think they could have knighted them, and they didn't need the priest to go, "Dude, that's going to make him a better fighter."
Yes, they did.
Orlando Bloom
Yes,
didn't.
they did.
Orlando Bloom could
Because
have.
Orlando Bloom was talking to you.
No. What they could have done, and what they should have done, is they should have knighted all of them. He should have been upfront, said, "You're all going to die. But you are fighting for the right cause, for the righteous cause." And you just look at all of them in the eyes, and everyone has this like nodding and understanding of what they're about to do. And like now they're happy because they've been knighted, which means maybe their family gets like a sheep or crop or whatever. And then we move forward. It's just the fact that they had to add this like 5-second bit where this like priest was chastising Orlando Bloom for knighting them, and Orlando Bloom has the audacity to lie to everyone in front of their face. I was just like, man, that was a stupid scene. I thought it was a stupid scene. I thought it didn't move the story along. It didn't. Sorry. I didn't think it was worth the time they put it in the movie, and that's just my opinion.
We can keep arguing about that one.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We'll move on. So the battle happens. God, you're so wrong. Anyways, the battle happens, and we get to the end of the movie, right? Or like the ending like scenes of the movie, where Saladin and Orlando Bloom's character are discussing terms after the Battle of Jerusalem, and we get this wonderful scene, and the actor who played how do you call it, Saladin, is Gaston Mossad. I butchered the crap out of that, and I apologize. He in this moment, I think that made the movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's towards the end of the movie, and it is the end of the movie. But his speech and his interaction with Orlando Bloom, that solidified in my mind at least, like, okay, this is what this movie is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think that was not that it made the movie for me. I'm not agreeing with that because I don't think anything made the movie for me. But I will say, I think that scene played an importance to the themes of the movie, and I think it did a good job of what we knew from a historical context was going to happen, which was that they had to surrender Jerusalem because they were so outnumbered. And I think that did a good job. I will say generally, I enjoyed the end of the movie because I thought it was brilliantly shot. I thought the pacing and I thought the storytelling in the fighting during the last battle scene was good. Right. The thing I hate most about huge battle scenes, and what some movies do terribly, is it's just like an all-out fight right from the beginning. Right. This had different sections of fighting that occurred, and they were doing different things during those fightings and filming those things, right? I mean, they had the hot oil, they had the harpoons that then brought down the towers, the siege towers. The one little thing I love that they put in there was when they started marching towards the city, and Orlando Bloom was calling out like the yardage using the rocks, right? Mm-hmm. I thought that was like, I mean, as a person who enjoys military movies and other clashes like that, I thought those were great points to put in to really get you interested in like, okay, how are they going to fight this battle, right? I enjoyed it. Also, Ridley Scott did a fantastic job of them and the camera team. I think there were some amazing shots, cinematographically. I mean, it's just like you were just like watching this, and I was like, man. Like, this is the early 2000s, and the shots that they are showing with whatever CGI they were using at the time, plus the actual, like, the practical effects that they're doing on scene, I thought it was brilliantly shot.
If we're talking about just how they framed the battle and shot this final battle, I appreciated the scene where Orlando Bloom assaults that tower and throws the Muslim flag over the edge
Hmm.
to indicate that no, this tower isn't taken, right? This isn't a spot that they've claimed for now people to like, funnel through. That no, my defense is holding.
Hmm.
And the response to that from then the camera is on Saladin's face. He's realizing that this person is actually uh, a good tactician, a good defender of the city, and it harkens back to they're playing chess, right? And that harkens back to the scene where Baldwin and Orlando Bloom's character are playing chess. And then if you notice when we're in the tent in Saladin's camp, he's playing chess with his cavalry commander,
Hmm.
right? So it's like these little things that I start noticing really bring the latter half of the movie together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and battle is a chess game, right? Like you have to be
Yep.
thinking about your opponent's moves, and predicting what's about to happen, even if they don't see it themselves. So
Right.
I thought, yeah, no, I would agree. I think the ending was brilliantly shot, and I thought there was more of what I would have wanted from the beginning of the movie at the
Mm,
towards the end.
I
Um,
can see that. I can
yeah.
agree with that.
Any other plot points or important tidbits you want to mention, Mike?
No, I think we've done a great job of kind of giving everybody the summation and our take on this movie.
Hmm.
So now we're gonna move into what everybody's been waiting for, and we're gonna give our ratings.
Yep, the
Since
disagreement.
Phil has his disagreements with me, I'll go first this time since I believe the first video I went second.
Hmm.
Um, for me, this is not a one ring to rule them all. This is not a 3 Elven rings at all,
Hmm.
right? Uh, this is a Mortal Ring movie. This is not a Dwarven movie where I'm sitting there going, "Oh, this is just bad." Um, obviously. Uh, I'm on the higher side of the Mortal Ring scale. I'm not gonna say that I'm giving it a 9,
Hmm.
right? I'm somewhere between probably a 6 and a 7. I'm leaning more towards a 7.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. I'm going with 7 Mortal Rings for Kingdom of Heaven, and that's
Wow, I thought you were going to
my
be
stand.
higher in the Mortal Rings. I thought you were coming in with a strong 8 or 9, from how you talked
I'm not a,
about this movie.
I'm not a psycho.
Yeah. Um, I appreciate your candid attitude, Mike. So I'm coming in a little bit lower. And hey, we said this in the first video. We're not going to always agree. And this movie was solid 4 Mortal Rings for me. I thought it was on the lower side of the 9 Mortal Rings. Just I think there was the pacing issues, the character development issues at the beginning that I struggled with. Some of those scenes that we talked about, which I was just laughing at how ridiculous it sounded while I watched the movie. Granted, maybe I watch it again and I say, okay, maybe it wasn't so ridiculous at the time. Um, but it was a culmination of that. I think I mean, it's also a culmination of what I think is a lot of fluff in the movie. The romantic partnership, kind of. I get what they were trying to do with like his eventual come up of like I'm the people's lord, now I'm in charge of you, now I'm convincing you to fight for your lives type of thing. But it just I think they could have done it better. And I wasn't so attached. I feel like if Orlando Bloom had been killed in sometime in that movie, and his knight, his hand, who I enjoyed watching, became the Lord or someone else, I don't think I would have been devastated by Orlando Bloom's death. Um, Not to say he didn't do a good job of acting. I think he's a great actor, but I'm coming in at a four Mortal Ring. I don't think I'll ever watch this movie again, unless somehow during Thanksgiving you force me to watch it. Um, I, and I don't see it as one of those movies that I think the strong points were its cinematography and its acting. I think the weak points were in its story and in its character development throughout that story, and so that's why I'm giving it 4.
Okay, fair enough. Well, guys, that is gonna be the end of our second episode. We're gonna finish it off with our ratings. That's how we're gonna do these reviews. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget the obligatory like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your coworkers,
Mhm.
even if you don't like them,
Yep.
especially if you don't like them, because then they have to deal with looking at our sweet faces.
Yeah, we've also attached our social medias on our page. We do have a Twitter page where we'll be posting when videos go live on YouTube. I think I got 0 likes on our first Twitter post, Mike. So make sure to follow us there so you're tracking when all of our stuff come out. We also have a Twitch channel where we sometimes stream video games. And depending on the outcomes of these movie reviews and what people want to see or watch, maybe we'll do some live stuff. It's a little bit more candid, as much editing as we do to these. So feel free to follow us there as well. And we hope you enjoyed the show.
Peace.